Human reactions to stress are natural responses of our nervous system intended to protect our integrity. However, continued exposure to stress, as occurs in developmental trauma, also known as childhood trauma, causes the nervous system to develop chronic adaptations to deal with stress, and this becomes our unconscious pattern to respond to life, including the way we see and treat ourselves. Hi, I'm Carla Lima, and today I will talk about how trauma responses appear in singing. Chronic stress has an impact in our vocal expression. I can say this from personal experience dealing with fear, anxiety, and self sabotage in singing. The comprehension of traumatic responses was helpful to me to start identifying how it can appear in singing and to develop a process to work with myself. I also remember people that I met with vocal issues or symptoms apparently without a reason, and whose stories gain new clarity when I think of them as possible cases of trauma symptoms. The polyvagal theory proposed by Stephen Portes provides a background that brings clarity of how mechanisms involving automatic response of our nervous system impact the way we respond to everyday situations with focus on relationships. But what does the polyvagal theory have to do with voice and singing? The goal of this video is to answer this question, and these are the chapters. I will open soon a workshop where you can learn exercises and practice to facilitate singing in case of trauma or emotional blocks. You can sign up for the studio's newsletter to be informed when it is possible to enroll. The link is in the description. The basic trauma responses are fight, flight, and shutdown. There are others called hybrid reactions, and I will mention here freeze and fawn. Now I will define each one of them and explain how they can impact singing. But first, I would like to clarify that the vocal characteristics I will mention here are only indicative or possible signs of traumatic responses. Do not take them as something exclusive or definitive. Do not listen it rigidly. Keep in mind that each case is different, each person is different, and each circumstance is different. But it can be a good guidance or a starting point if you are dealing with trauma. Fight. Fight is a response from the sympathetic nervous system and is a mobilization to action. It can appear, for example, as being hyper-defensive of other people's comments. If I find myself defensive, think that I must defend what I have to expose, I'm in fight mode. As vocal symptoms, fight can appear as hoarseness or harshness as consequence of anger and tension. Tension in the throat can be fight. Tightening the body can be fight. Disproportionate loud voice and also intonation with high pitch that conveys anxiety. A classical example is when a person speaks and others think that they are fighting. Flight or flee. Flight or flee is in the same way of fight, a response from the sympathetic nervous system, is a mobilization to action. The difference here is that the action is not toward the perceived danger, but away from it. Flight can appear as self-sabotage, when I intend to do one task, but find myself always being distracted. It's difficult to concentrate. It can also appear when we want to say something or sing and we don't have courage. So if I renounce expressing myself or unconsciously create circumstances that make this impossible, it can be flight mode. Here are some vocal examples. Losing your voice close to a performance or presentation, difficulty singing with a strong voice, difficulty taking up your space as you were afraid of your power, difficulty setting boundaries because of fear of other people's reactions when you say no or I disagree. Shut down or faint. Shutdown or faint is a response from the parasympathetic nervous system and is a reaction of immobilization or inactivity. This response can be present, for example, when a person is constantly exhausted. It is difficult to get out of bed because there is no energy. Another characteristic is when faced with an uncomfortable or threatening situation, the person feels out of the body and numb. Stage fright, when very intense, can appear with the sensation of detachment from the body. In shutdown, it's difficult to concentrate because you are not present. The difference between this and flight response is that flight or flee has an active characteristic, and shutdown feels like I don't have energy, I give up. Some vocal examples are a weak voice, a voice that conveys no energy, a monotonous voice, in cases when the voice does not come out due to fear. Here, I would like to point out the case of people who suffered sexual abuse and could not scream because they lost their voices. This is a consequence of fear and shock, a response of shutdown or freeze that I will explain next, and never a reason for shame or guilt. Stage fright, as I mentioned, can appear as a shutdown response, although the other responses can also be present in stage fright. Freeze or rigidity. Freeze or rigidity is a hybrid state of mobilization and immobilization at the same time. It causes the feeling of being stuck. In terms of nervous system, there is sympathetic and parasympathetic activation, and it feels like two vectors in opposite directions. There is the desire and impulse to act, but at the same time, an enormous resistance. In my experience, it caused feelings of anger towards myself when I realized that the resistance was in my body and I could not consciously control it. Regards to singing, when I perceived the impediment was inside me, it made me feel sometimes broken, sometimes tired and disappointed, and sometimes angry and frustrated. For many years, I had a sensation of having a huge energy, wanting to find a way to canalization. So, my natural impulse is to sing and express myself. But at the same time, I'm afraid that something very bad could happen or that the environment is not safe or suitable. So the body becomes paralyzed by the contradiction of these two energies. This is a practical situation of how the freeze response can affect voice and singing. This contradiction of energies can cause tension in the body, including the throat, and affects breathing that becomes shorter and more tense. It can make people want to force their voice to escape the feeling of entrapment and thus end up causing functional damage to the larynx. In other words, the anxiety to get the desired result can cause the person to push through and create a functional dysphonia. Fawn or please and appease. Fawn or please and appease is also a hybrid state. There is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system activation. In this response, there is submission or appeasing, which is when a person is a pleaser out of fear as a survival strategy. But this is, in reality, an active attempt to deal with a perceived danger. There is hypervigilance here. This hypervigilance is the sympathetic component. If, for example, a child grows up in an environment where he or she needs to usually use this strategy to survive or being accepted, this traumatic response can turn into a default behavior in relationships. It impacts our capacity to put ourselves first and set clear and healthy boundaries. It impacts our voice and singing because this response interferes with our capacity for authentic communication. For example, can you say no to someone without over-explaining, feeling guilt, scared, angry, or defensive? Can you express your truth without fear of judgment? Do you express yourself in a way that you think other people will like, denying your true desire? This kind of difficulties in self-expression can be related with fawn or please and appease response. Notice that all these responses, fight, flight, shut down, freeze, and fawn, can appear in the same person. In my personal experience, over time, you will start to notice that the response follow a pattern. Your nervous system tends to use the same responses to similar circumstances. But how can understanding these traumatic responses help us to return to balance when singing? I will answer this question in the next video, so stay tuned. As I said in the beginning, I will launch soon a workshop with practical tools to facilitate singing in case of trauma or emotional blocks. If you are interested, sign up for the studio newsletter to be informed about the launch of the workshop. The link is in the description. I also created a resource to help you start organizing your singing practice, implementing strategies to overcome the fear of singing. It is a free resource and the link is below in the description. I invite you to like this video and to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye.